I didn't see it.
That isn't fake.
My position when
All news is fake.
I can't tell what's real or what isn't.
that position go in the newspaper, or did it go in the newspaper that it's open for anyone to apply, or?
Tomorrow, if you guys vote tonight to set the date,
Yeah, fake
you
news.
know, as we have it on the agenda. I don't put in. You know, all of the
Only charged for the fact is it only say.
media. Email alerts, all of that.
It doesn't really. Why would you? Why would you?
Signal to Councilor Prost, please take a seat. Good evening. Call to order this workshop of the Auburn City Council for January 9th, 2017. First item on the agenda are some staff recommended updates to the tax acquired property policy. So I'll turn it over to our finance director.
I have provided you with a marked up copy so you can see what I've added, what I've taken away. I think the major changes that I want to highlight are we're asking to have 1 year to work with the current owners or the last owner of record in order to pay those taxes. They need to notify us within 30 days and make an arrangement within 60 days, but then we give them 1 year to pay that and get it back in their name. That's really the biggest change. Some of the other wording, one thing we did take out, and I'll highlight, is the old policy said that we couldn't sell a piece of property unless we got 50% of the assessed value. I think that's not really realistic. We did put in there that we would not sell it for any less than the taxes and all of the costs that we have incurred. Those are really the major changes. We added in a section about heirs because there was nothing where heirs were addressed in the old policy. And I guess if people have questions, I'll try to answer them for you, or.
A couple of questions that I have. One, and I've heard this from some residents just trying to get some clarity. In terms of reporting back to the council on a regular basis, would it be possible, or would you have suggestions for language that might have a quarterly report with a list of properties, or a semi-annual report, or as part of the acceptance of the audit, something that is a check-in in terms of how we're doing following these time windows?
Sure, yeah, I can try to write something up. I'll put it at the end of the policy that, probably semi-annually. I mean, if that's okay with you, I think that would probably be quarterly. I don't know that we have that much activity.
Whatever you think makes sense, but I think something in there, so if a council says, well, how do I know? They can say, well, we haven't gotten our semi-annual report. And that way you're not forced to create extra reports.
Yeah, and we'll post also on the website, we can post that on the website, but yeah, I'll write something up and put that on the end of the policy.
And the other question, and it certainly has been in the news the last few days with the elderly couple that had a home in Albion. And I, at least from my experience, when we've had folks that have been in a tough situation, staff have done a good job helping people through poverty abatements, and we've wrestled with that. How do you see this process playing out, or maybe you can describe for the public and for the council, if we have folks that are senior that may be eligible for reverse mortgages or otherwise, how do we work with that process to try to help folks stay in their home if we can?
We actually had one, it was last year or the year before, that was struggling and was trying to do a reverse mortgage, but didn't really know how to go about it. My tax collector, along with the GA director, we got together, and Nancy really worked with the mortgage company that was gonna do the reverse mortgage, because the person didn't really understand. So, you know, we're willing, we talk to people about those, explain to them that, you know, that may be an option for them. And we work with them as best we can, and the mortgage companies, to try to make it happen for them, if that's what they want to do. I think, I really want to commend my staff, because I think she goes over and above, trying to make sure that people know everything that they need to know, different ways, things that they can do to try to stay there. We don't want, I mean, personally, me, I don't want to kick anyone out of their house.
And I completely agree, and my experience since I've been here is that that's what staff do. I don't know how it would be best to memorialize that, or at least some reference to that in the policy, but I know there's likely to be a legislative discussion about things to either pull up to the state level or to impose additional local regulations, and the extent to which we can document our good practice and maybe even communicate back to our legislative delegation the things that we do internally that maybe could be a model.
Okay.
I don't want to create more steps, because it sounds like the practice here is there, but maybe we can memorialize that in some way in the policy.
Okay, I will work on that for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Questions of the council?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Floor's
Would you speak for a moment with regard to the change, or to the change of the minimum bid of 50% of assessed value of the property? Because I can see a good foundation or a good reasoning for having that language in the policy, and I'd like to get into a little bit on why the change is being recommended.
Some of the property is only good for abutters, and, you know, I guess my feeling is to get it back on the tax rolls and to get back our taxes that we didn't collect, all the taxes, all the fees that if we've had to have legal, and we keep track of all of that, any of the mailings that we've done, so that the city isn't out anything, but it's back on the tax rolls. And I think by limiting us to 50% of the assessed value, we may not get rid of any properties or certain properties that are no good to anybody but the abutter.
Now, I noticed that that language is specifically listed under section 4.3, which is headed sale to abutters. Is that the only area where that language would apply with regard to the 50% of the assessed value?
I think it was, yeah.
So this change would only affect bids from
To abutters.
abutters. Is it fair to say that the original concern, possibly for requiring that language, was that because abutters would most likely, or be inclined, I should say, to purchase the property and keep it as open space or undeveloped, enhancing the size of their lot?
I wasn't here when this one was done, so I know that 50% was not in the last one I had a hand in. Oh, that was in the period that I was gone.
But the 50% only applies to abutters, right? To bids from abutters, is that correct?
Yes.
So the assessed value of the abutting property might be based on the fact that there is a residence on the property. And if the abutter places a bid to purchase it, the tax-acquired property, chances are probably pretty good that they're just looking for some open space next to their residence.
Yeah, most of the properties that would just go to abutters would be properties that are non-conforming, that no one else could do anything with.
I see.
So it would only be a piece of property that would be good to the abutters.
So the
to add.
The assessed value would be probably based on its use, prior to tax acquisition, but the fact remains that you probably couldn't do anything because it would be a non-conforming property. And
That's correct.
in what percentage of the situations that occur? Greater than 50, greater than half?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out.
I'm just curious. I
Yeah.
mean,
Let me do some research.
I don't want us to lose out on taxable valuation because somebody wants to purchase it for $10,000, pay another 15 to have it demolished and taken away so that they can plant a bunch of trees and have, double the size of the lot that their house is on.
Generally, it would be property that has nothing on it. I mean, it wouldn't have, if it's a non-conforming lot, most of these that are abutters are just open land.
Okay.
They're not, don't have a residence or a building on them.
Okay.
Other council questions?
Yeah, I'd like to throw one back out there for the abutter. I definitely don't see why that we should give them the first chance when there's an opportunity to just say that this piece of land is for sale and allow anyone that wants to buy it, because the abutter may never give you 50%. And there may be someone else out there that would want to buy that piece of land that you're actually taking that opportunity away. So I don't know why I want to give the abutter the first choice and then the rest, the second choice. That, to me, that doesn't sound very fair to anybody. It should be an open.
I would agree with that. I mean, why would butters get I understand heirs, having sort of a right of first refusal, but why are abutters then, in the second position to have a bite at the apple before the rest of the public? I don't know that I agree with that policy. And I'm not sure what the basis for it is.
I guess for me, I didn't read this whole, I would say that if it's a non-conforming or unbuildable lot, then it would be offered first to abutters. So,
And then anything that
it
might
doesn't
be.
quite say that, so I need to reword that, because that's what I was thinking.
So if it's a buildable,
If it's a buildable lot, then I would never say to do that, so I need to fix this, then.
So we'll want to
If
clarify
that's,
that.
yeah.
Is that what you're getting at, Jim and Leroy?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's a non-conforming lot and undevelopable, then, okay, maybe there's a basis there for offering it to abutters
I thought that's what this was. so,
after
sorry.
heirs.
It says that that'll be considered, but it doesn't, it's not clear enough. I mean, I think we can clear that up to state that better.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it does mention that, but it says take into consideration those
Exactly.
things, but
Yeah.
that doesn't say a hard, fast rule, and I
Right.
think what we're asking for is
I think we got to change the way.
Yeah.
the only
I-
way it'll be
I will-
offered to abutters is if it's non-conforming and it's not a legal lot, the way it sets by itself.
Right.
I think that-
That's what I
One thing I'd like
Wanted
to
to
see
say.
is timelines, a little bit more firmed up. I noticed that we mentioned something referring to the timeline in 4-1, but the 4-1 is not really a timeline. So when it comes to like offering it to heirs, I'd like to see some sort of a timeline. It says, okay, we're going to offer it to heirs through a certified mail process or whatever, but after a certain length of time with no response, we're done. As opposed to leaving it open, you could wait a year to, for somebody to respond. And I think in a case like that, we should have a little bit more firmer timeline on that.
My other question is, do we, under section 2.2, the committee, you've got a half a dozen different committee people, like the economic, community development, assessing, public service, recreation, fire, police. Do we need all them really on that, and why do we need them if we do?
The reason that there was so many people on there was because economic community development knows, what's going on as far as development, the comp plan, whether there's plans to use property in that area. Assessing, she does the assessing part of it. Public services, there could be property at the end of a dead-end street that would be better to be left open so that when they plow, those types of things. We've always had a well-rounded committee, because not everybody doesn't have the same needs or usage for property, so they come at it from a different point of view.
And I'll also point out that they're only pulled together as necessary, so it's not like it's a frequent meeting that these departments are being pulled together and putting a lot of, I guess, a tax on staff time and workload. But I, just to support Director Eastman's, statement, I think it is good to have that perspective from the multiple departments. They do see things differently and they have a different perspective, so we like to have that input. It helps us in determining the best path.
Well, my only concern about that would be making sure you can get together regularly with the group that's got to discuss this on a regular basis, as opposed to waiting till you can get everybody together. That would be my concern, having so many different people involved, because, it's getting them all together in one room it's hard enough, I'm sure, already, without adding yet another committee meeting. You might consider having input from them, so that there has to be some sort of a request for your input and a reply to a smaller group of people, as opposed to having them meet before you can move further.
We can look at that.
I understand the input's necessary, but I don't know that necessarily there has to be a member from each of that department on a committee.
Doesn't say the committee has to have meetings.
I mean, it could be email. It could be some sort of confirmation that way that would be just as well. No, I don't see any problems with this, go move on, or they, so.
Any other thoughts? All right, so I think staff has some changes they're gonna make, but it sounds like there's consensus on that, so we can move it to the next meeting agenda, but maybe we'll kind of go over with the language of those changes in advance.
Okay. Will do.
Any public input on this item? I should have gotten to that before, I apologize. I see former Councilor Gray at times shaking his head in agreement, and other times not. Happy New Year.
Joe Gray, Soapers Mill Road. The non-conforming lot thing, 1863 Pownell Road is a prime example. It's a non-conforming lot, but why would you give it to abutters first? That's 9 acres of land. For example, say I owned 1863 Pownell Road and the abutters hated me, but they like him. So why can't he have the opportunity to buy it and get a little piece of land from the next door neighbor and make it a conforming lot? So you guys are all going into this rule assuming certain things. She's assuming that it's a non-conforming lot or it's not buildable or whatever, and so she made out the policy that way. And there's a lot of other cases, so you need to make this much more general in nature and make it so that it is applicable in more than what's in her mind as she writes it. There's a lot of things here that this rule as written is not great, I don't think.
Anyone else? Gentlemen in the back row, you're all set? All right. We'll bring it back to the council. Anything else from staff? Good?
But I'm strongly against the abutter being the first one, other than the heir, going with this, because there's a lot of people that like to have just a piece of green land, and, like myself, I just bought one out in the country, and it's only so that my son will have a piece of land to hunt on if he wants it, and it doesn't qualify to build a house, but it does qualify to hunt, so nobody can put no hunting signs on that property. But I know it might be 40 years before you ever build a house on that piece of property, but I wanted to purchase it for that reason. So it's just, I think it should be open for everyone that wants to buy a piece of land to buy it.
Second item on the agenda is target area city-owned properties development proposal. Long name. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Eric Cousins, Deputy Director of Community and Economic Development. At the December 19th workshop, I think it was, We discussed this in sort of a broader context across the city and decided to focus in on trying to nail down a policy that the council thought would work well for reviewing parcels for development that are city-owned, and also to start to take a look at the downtown target area, then move on to the other target areas in future discussions. I've shelled out a draft policy just loosely based on the tax acquired policy. It was the only other existing policy that I saw that was very much like what we're considering here. I do have a few questions that I want to clarify so we can sort of nail down that policy, and I know the mayor had some thoughts about simplifying the policy as well. If you'd like, we can go through the policy as I drafted it, or happy just to have a discussion about what you liked or didn't like about it and go from there. Then we can move on to an individual parcel type discussion.
Any preference? I want to get in the discussion?
Well, you can review the policy if there's any highlights that you'd like to go over first.
Okay. Was looking to establish the purpose of the policy. A little different than the tax acquired policy, but a lot of the goals are similar: to return the city-owned property to the tax rolls and to grow value. That would be to get the existing parcel back on the tax rolls, but also to see the maximum investment on that parcel to grow potential value. Create a competitive market for key properties, and that would be by using more of a request for proposals type of process, so we can clearly spell out what we want to see on that parcel and see who can deliver the best or closest project to what the city envisions for that. Reduce the opportunity for neighborhood blight. That's straight from the tax acquired property. I thought it was appropriate here. Preserve neighborhoods by having properties sold in a timely manner so they don't languish on the city-owned list. We really don't have the capacity in a lot of cases to maintain random lots throughout the city as far as mowing to the same level that an individual property owner could. So it makes sense from that perspective to get them back out to be privately owned. Wanted to have a well-rounded committee to take a look at these. We certainly could look at using the tax acquired committee, the same as Director Eastman mentioned. But I was thinking where these are more oriented towards the development, it may make sense to use the existing plan review committee. We meet monthly. We rarely miss a meeting because we almost always have agenda items that need attention at least monthly. And it's a well-rounded group of pretty much every department in the city, as well as the Auburn Water Sewer District and the airport is represented on that. Wanted to establish the responsibilities for that committee, if that's the committee that the council accepted to review that. It is mandatory that each department attends those meetings. Those meetings also review other private proposals, zoning changes, other issues that the city's encountering. So we have good representation at those meetings already. And then establish a set of basic information that we would make sure we at least touched on those items to give a well-rounded and thorough recommendation to the city council. The way that this is written, the Economic and Community Development Department would then take the input from all those departments and formulate a recommendation to the city council. If the council decides they want to move forward with selling a parcel, we would decide at that point if we're going to market them with the realtor, solicit sealed bids, or put out a much more specific or detailed RFP that lays out exactly what the city wants and how proposals would be judged, not only on potential sale price, but even less so on sale price and more on another set of criteria that I think would include long-term tax revenues, how the project meets or provides for elements that the city has already expressed a desire for in the comprehensive plan or other plans. Just as an example, if somebody said, I will pay you $100,000 for this lot and I'll put a two-family house on it that will pay $4,000 a year, I would encourage the council to look at that proposal. And if you also had a proposal that says, hey, I'll pay you $20,000 a year, but I'll put $1 million office building that will pay $40,000 a year in taxes, we go with the longer term tax return over a longer period, over an initial cash payment that then may not cover the cost of services going forward. Was just looking at having a way to lay out on the front end through an RFP what the council is looking for and make sure that people have an opportunity to put together a project that best matches that in a competitive way. As with the tax acquired policy, the council could reject or accept any purchase offer. It doesn't have to be based on price. And we probably can't anticipate every possible reason why you might want to do that. So we left it very open that the council would have the opportunity to reject or accept any proposal for any reason. And in a process like that, one of the questions that I had laid out on the information sheet, I think there needs to be, at the RFP stage, there either needs to be a really clear set of scoring criteria laid out so that staff can judge the proposals in the end based on that scoring criteria, or they should come back to the council for a final decision. It's not a fair or a good spot to put staff in to judge proposals without a clear scoring criteria if we're using something other than price. It just really leaves the door open to being criticized for choosing one developer over another or person over another for subjective reasons. So I think that would be important to lay out if staff was going to decide which proposal would be accepted and it was not based purely on price. There would have to be a clear scoring criteria laid out.
What types of, if I could, Mr. Mayor, what types of criteria would you envision as being important?
I was thinking tax revenues over a period. We were suggesting maybe 20 years that we look at a proposal, estimate the value, and project out the tax revenues over a 20-year period. Consistency with city plans and neighborhood, that it's of a scale that fits the rest of the neighborhood and consistent with what the comp plan has laid out for that particular area. If there was a component where they were investing substantially in public infrastructure, I would use Mechanic Savings Bank as an example that added street lighting and sidewalk improvements as part of their private project. If there was a project proposing to do things like that on their own dime, that would be a good criteria.
That was done on our dime.
That one was, but those types of improvements. Job creation, I don't think, you're not going to see job creation out of a residential lot in a residential neighborhood, but for the right commercial parcel, that could be a criteria. And we're certainly open to any other criteria that the council saw fit. I just think it would be important to lay out what criteria would be using so people have the benefit of that while they put together their proposals.
Still working through.
No, that essentially covers the policy.
So I handed out, and Leroy, if you want to pass that to Dennis, or a copy. I think it's a good start what you put down here. One of the, I kind of made a short bullet list of what I would hope we might be able to do to simplify and accelerate getting parcels made available and then leave them, in essence, perpetually available. Unlike tax acquired properties, which on an annual basis we're going to be adding to, there are only a few opportunities where the city would have new land that it owns that it would put on the market. I mean, there's a very limited stock of land here. So to create significant new systems inside the city, I'm not sure makes a ton of sense or that I would necessarily support. I'd like to see us look at every parcel we own in all three target areas. Since we're talking about areas that would be eligible either for CDBG, home fund, or perhaps tax increment finance investment in the downtown TIF, trying to look at all those areas and start to see what we might have for proposals, in particular where additional workforce housing proposals may come forward, and those areas would be eligible for some of those investments. I'd like to see us formulate, you think you started that with the downtown target area with that spreadsheet? You know, I don't think it would be significant additional work to have all the parcels that are owned in the three target areas sort of follow a similar approach. I think you guys have done a good job starting to flag things that would be a hold, not available, et cetera, et cetera. You did answer for me why the Great Falls Plaza lot is not there, and probably should be, and that it falls out of the downtown census tract, so it wouldn't have been flagged as part of the downtown target area, but I'm glad that would be included. I reference a lot of what you did with respect to benchmarks. As we would look at proposals, my suggestion would be that the council gets these proposals and within a certain period would get back to a developer. Similar to what happens now, you guys engage with a developer on your own. This would with these parcels. When you get a proposal, you'd review it and the council would have an executive session discussion about it. I'm not so naive to think that some of these in-town lots wouldn't require some incentives. For talking new construction, the RKG memo, the city had an economic and a real estate consultant take a look at the New Auburn master plan. If you haven't seen that memo, it's on the website under the New Auburn page. That really looked at the barriers to new construction, in that what market rates are for commercial space and for residential. The market itself will not support new construction. So being mindful of that, I think it's important for us to be able to publicly say, someone could make us an offer that maybe it's a lot for X amount, and if a tax increment was structured this way, or if a CDBG star loan was made available for 2 storefronts, I think part of how we measure the criteria are, you know, what kind of outputs is the city having to put on the table to make those things happen, which is why I reference, you know, there's total property tax revenue generated, then there's net property tax revenue. So in the downtown TIF, for example, it's 100% capture. So while there may be additional property tax, it's not going to help the average taxpayer because it's simply being captured again. There's reasons for that, I get it, but I think that's part of the discussion. It's not just tax revenue, it's net. Some of the base criteria for each parcel, I think just as staff created this spreadsheet, I'm confident that staff could add another column and have some key considerations. Those have been flagged on the parcels that involve CDBG funding. Maybe we have a winter overflow lot that we have another lot that might be better for winter overflow, and this lot might be ripe for redevelopment. I think Eric and I were talking about a lot on Main Street that may have some CDBG funds entangled. That may mean that there has to be a restriction for a low to moderate income benefit. Some parcels, there's some on Newbury Street that are along the river that we may want to maintain river access as part of a development proposal, a corridor behind the lots. I think staff could go through that spreadsheet and identify, are there public benefits we may want to retain that would be part of the listing of an individual parcel. But I think staff could do that. And again, in some of the areas where we may have an expectation for mixed use, there are some lots that would make sense to be purely residential. Some lots, the highest and best use would likely be, in particular with the form-based code, some sort of mixed use. And I think that gives developers a chance to look at these properties and say, I do purely residential, here are the lots that would make sense, or I might have an appetite because I've done mixed use, and they look at those lots. We should have a standing website that lists that these parcels are all available when they are made available. And I suggest a timeline, and it's probably overly aggressive, but I think the reality is once those parcels are up and the council says, okay, these conditions make sense, this is how we're gonna have discussions about these, that we give an initial time window, 60, 90 days for folks to submit the first round, and then we start reviewing these on a rolling basis. So if sometime in August, someone says, I wanna buy that lot on Main Street, here's what I'm gonna do, they know that within 30 days, they're gonna have an answer, yes or no. And then the dynamic is once we get this standing list up there, it's there and available. So as we try to cover other areas of the city with a similar approach, developers know that if they see something they're interested in, they can make a pitch they could make a proposal, and they know within a very tight time frame whether they're getting a yes or a no. And it's not let's do this process over and over. If that plan review committee is gonna take an initial stab to at least make sure it passes a straight face test before we get it, it falls within their time window. Lastly, since my interest is if these are developable lots, let's get them out there and make sure we get them producing, that after 6 months, we agree to sit back down again. And we look at how the process went. Was it too bumpy? Was it too onerous? Are we not getting proposals? Did staff have some folks call them that said they're interested, but given the real estate market, they wouldn't build, or they wouldn't commit to build today, but maybe they'd build down the road? But some way for us to check back in. And then maybe we want to make it a permanent policy, but preferably we start selling this stuff, and ultimately, any property that comes on the other side, if the staff are going to keep it, if staff recommend keeping it under tax acquired for a municipal purpose, then we wouldn't be selling it. If they're holding it for a trail or a park project or some other municipal purpose, a new school, if they're not, then we're holding it for development. So it can then simply be put back on that other page of city properties available, make us a proposal. So that's at least some thoughts that I tried to pull together to maybe simplify and accelerate the process a little bit.
I would 100% support establishing or creating a standing website. There's no reason why a potential developer should have to come into City Hall in person and look at a map in your office, which is, you guys are great, and it's great to meet with you in person, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, people should be able to access this information if they're interested in investing here without having to make a personal visit and to come and check it out. So I would wholeheartedly support that.
We've started to set up a format during review with this map that can be put online, and we can start to pull off the ones that are not ready for sale and highlight the ones that are. So not only can they access information about each parcel, but they can see, you know, the proximity to each other, if they needed parking on one lot and a structure on another or something like that.
I think that's the right way to think.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on a scoring criteria where the staff score proposals or proposals directly to the council?
I think that's a good idea. That's the right way to go. I mean, there should be some basic criteria that are laid out as a part of this. If you look at other development processes that we've talked about as a council over the last year and a half, they also involve those types of sort of criteria that people or investors or developers are scored upon. When you have an RFP, obviously that goes out with some very specific information. I think that it would be wise to include some sort of scoring criteria that developers can aspire to. When you're looking at developing a piece of property, whether it's you know, a vacant building that you're looking to acquire and turn into apartments, or a parking lot where you hope for new development. If you're trying to work with a partner on the other side of the table, it's good to know what your partner wants in the negotiation. And to be able to telegraph that to a potential developer really reduces transaction costs in the negotiation. And if we can reduce transaction costs for investors, that's going to yield more positive outcomes, because the unknown is scary to anybody. And when you're a developer and you're not sure what the criteria are, that could really deter you from investing your time into putting together a proposal. So if we're very clear about what the criteria are, and I think that, you know, the comments that you made before about what some proposed criteria might be, or scoring points might be, I think that that's right on point. And I don't think you'd be reinventing the wheel. I think that could really help facilitate getting some good bids and getting, probably casting a wider net and getting more investors interested, because they know what we're looking for here in the city. So.
Go ahead. Just, I don't know where it appropriately fits, but I don't see a lot of public input built into this thing. Is there at some point, should the public offer an opportunity to opine as to what we're doing here?
Well, we have meetings.
I mean, I know it comes, if the developer came with a proposal to the planning board, it would be vetted at that point in time, but rather than heading too far down the road, if there's some significant community opposition to, you know, a plan for a lot, maybe it would be good to surface it early.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons and certainly Councilor Titus pushed this, and I said, let's get it on the agenda. One of my concerns has been, right now, a developer on their own can go to staff, make a proposal, and then it ends up in an executive session. Now we're talking about disposing of public land without any discussion. And I've seen before I think it was the year I ran, we had a city park across the street, no public process, no public input. Next thing you know, the council emerges from executive session into parking lot. No public input. The deal was already cooked.
That's what I'm concerned
But
about.
in this case, we're actually saying, here are the lots we own, and we're starting that process. So the extent to which we raise public awareness, if the council's gonna ultimately vote and say, these are the parcels we're gonna put on a page to list, I mean, the council's gonna have to vote to say, here are the parcels we're putting out for sale. And getting public input at that point about that. Otherwise, the driver's zoning. I mean, whatever can legally happen there can legally happen there. This is not talking
Yeah,
about
I
zoning
just
changes.
didn't want to ignore the public aspect of this.
If you wanted to be specific about a public outreach process, we could certainly build something in. Typically, for a public hearing, we'd do a mailing and a newspaper notice. But we could go that route or not. It's up to the council.
In a way, especially if it's on a dedicated webpage, you know, it's out there for a number of people. But there are people that just don't have web access and so on and so forth. So just want to make sure we cover all the bases.
Thank you. Thank you. I like the way this is laid out. I think this is a great chart, and adding on is going to be easy. And adding to and dropping off as we go, this could be a living document. But I had a couple of concerns. One of them is that this committee would probably determine if there's strategic value to put through this process. One of the things that I don't like to see is a piece of property that we have that's just sitting there that's never really going to mean much. We should just put it on the open market, put it out for bids and get rid of it. That was one of my goals. And I know that this council 3 to 6 months ago voted to dispose of 3 or 4 pieces of property and voted for it. I don't know if anybody can give me an update on anything that's happened with those properties. Or are they in the strategic list, or where, because we said dispose of them. We voted here. Because I think there's some property we just need, instead of hashing it all out and taking a year to decide that it's not going to be worth anything, it should go immediately too. There's several lists here. There's a list of what we want to hold and have a developer work with. It's stuff that we want to hold for ourselves. But then there's stuff that we just want to dispose of quickly and get it somehow on the tax rolls, or at least off from our rolls.
And I think it's been a while since we've done a comprehensive review of all city-owned properties like this, so hopefully we can knock a lot of those off the list through this process and then not have that come up very often.
And if it's being held, a piece of property is being held, so it should be on this list and the reason why it's being held.
I think that this, I mean, when we talked about this, the sooner we can get through, I think it's staging it. If we try to review every property the city owns citywide.
No, I understand in this area.
Right, so
yeah.
let's get through the 3 target areas.
Right.
And then we get those listed, and then come back and say, what's the volume of the rest of the properties? If it's a smaller volume that we could take in one workshop to talk about, or if we want to split north to south. The ability to go stepwise, I think, so we can learn a process, does this work, and then broaden it. I just think if we got into talking about every property in the city.
Well, eventually we will cover every city. but
That's the goal.
This is the step, and I really like this, but I just want to make sure that we're looking at this kind of a list and deciding, like you have here, we're holding it for this reason. We're not selling it because it's city,
Okay.
being used by the city. And this is very important to see this. But I also noticed that is Newbury Street in this area? No.
Just across the line, I believe, into the New Auburn area. But that's New Auburn, and then Union Street areas would be next.
And I would urge us to do all 3 target areas now. I think it'd be cleaner to get all 3 target areas moving.
We can certainly do that. I couldn't have had all 3 ready for tonight.
No, but I mean, the process looks good to me. I like
Oh, good.
where you're heading with this.
Do the other 2 and get them back to you as a group.
I think the extent to which in the spreadsheet you could flesh out what you may see for criteria, or how you may bundle properties, because you get to it in the narrative, properties that may be good for mixed use or residential. I don't think we need to, it'd be fun to have the conversation like we're playing SimCity with each individual parcel, but the extent to which you guys can bundle similar property types and then say, here's how we're gonna split those to do that initial work, I think would be helpful.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor and the rest of the council, I would like us to do it a little bit quicker reporting, like every 4 months, because doing it 6 months, and if we start at the wrong time, we're only gonna see this once or twice before, you know, most of us are even done our next term if we start. So if they could do every 4 months, and if that wouldn't work one time or another, then we could say, okay, we'll give you an extension for 2 months, but that 6 months is not much
The
time.
6 month was my recommendation, that we would revisit the whole process before this council ended the term. My suggestion is that the timing of an RFP for the first bundle of properties, that we set a time window, that the goal is to have the properties, the RFPs out on X date, and how long do we want to give people in that first round? So if it's 45 days, if it's 60 days, that at some point after that initial round, it's rolling review. And that the developer, anyone making a proposal knows that within 30 days, if they make a bid, they're going to hear back. So I would expect that we would very soon after listing, start having people make proposals, and we would have discussions about that.
Yeah.
As long as it's not always 666.
No, I just think some of this stuff, you want to give it time to sort of run through the first rush and then talk about whether it worked or not.
Well, I definitely, once the listing starts, we need to have a report within 3 months or something like that, because you need to know, I mean, one of my concerns is I want to make sure that we're working with people that want to work with us. And the only way we're going to know that is get a report. How's it working? And we got this listing out there. What did we get for responses and what was going on? We need to know. Because I don't want us shutting down and being so finite that nothing's going to work unless you're doing exactly the way we want it. That's not the answer either. There could be several options. We got to be more flexible if we want these properties to go back on the market. And the only way we're going to know that is to see what the results are of the listing. But I would like to know if there's anything was done with that first batch that we did 4 months ago. So if somebody could let me know. I don't know if they just sat there and nothing happened, or if they were actually put out somewhere to be sold, or...
We'll get you an update on all of them, but they certainly didn't just sit there. There's been some progress, but to give an accurate update, I'd like to look at everything.
Just one other comment, could you make the green a little lighter?
Yes, I can do that.
If you want input on the hashed lots, I would say put them out there, and let's see what we get for proposals.
Okay, and that was a big question for the council. Do we want to start looking at existing winter relief parking lots? I mean, someday, the parking lot on the other end of the parking garage out here should be a multi-story commercial building. I think that's the goal, but we may not be there yet, but we can put them out there for proposals.
Unless people know that we're willing to entertain it. I mean, this is a way to say, listen, we're open, if the right deal comes along, we're open for it.
Yeah, let's get them out there.
Okay?
So let's see what we get for it. We test the market, see what we get for interest.
David?
We should get rid of this property if we can. Get it back on the tax rolls.
I'm glad we're thinking along the same lines of getting property onto the tax rolls, because that's hugely important for our community. We need to broaden our tax base if we want to stay ahead of the game, get ahead of the game, and there's no other way to do it besides broadening our tax base.
In terms of next steps, I'm going to assume staff would probably need more than 2 weeks to refine timelines, do the property spreadsheets. But could we at least have a workshop block set up to get an update and maybe review status on some of that?
We could do a quick update in, I think, in 2 weeks, just, where staff is at, but, I mean, I don't know how much progress, but certainly just a quick check-in isn't a problem. Unless we want to wait till the first meeting in February where we can give a bit more
We're going to lose
robust.
time when we get into budget, so the extent to which, if it took staff from the last meeting to this meeting to create one spreadsheet, maybe we could at least have the spreadsheets and some idea of timeline.
Yep, we could certainly do that. And I do want to reiterate that these color codings and recommendations have not been brought through every city department or done any kind of a legal review, but it's an initial piece of information to try to see which ones you want to move forward with a more detailed and time-consuming review.
Dennis may mention it in his report, the roundtable that's being hosted with developers and financiers, is the intent to highlight that this is coming in Auburn as part of that? Is that on the agenda?
It is. We're actually going to do a call out. We're going to be calling each person because we haven't got a great response coming back to us for that meeting. We're going to do some more reach out.
Let me know what I can do to help on that, if I can make some calls too. Awesome. Thank you guys both. Thank you, Rosemary, for your great work on the mapping. It's good to have these tools.
Does this one have public as well?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Just make a quick comment, that, Rosemary, that website with the GIS mapping is a very handy tool. It's really nice to, and the information is really available. You don't have to go digging for it like you used to. So, you know, it helps me find out things like, is a street in my, in my ward? So, no, but it's, you know, it's very well presented and easy to use and very quick. It doesn't take forever to load onto the computer, so it's good.
I have one other comment.
No, you're out of order.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, I'm just joking.
My comment is, I would like you to use the same committee that Jill and this side is going to use for, so we're all on the same page all the time, instead of having all these extra people that you've got showing down here in your committee. I would like to see the same committee doing the same thing on both sides.
Any public comment? Mr. Gray, Mr. Lee, you're our public. Good for now? Okay.
Again, Joe Gray, Soapers Mill Road. In section 4.4, it says rejection of bid, and it says, nothing in this policy shall limit or modify the discretion of the city manager or the city council to reject the bid. Who gets to reject it? Both of you, independently of each other? It's little stuff like that that's through this whole thing. Up here earlier, it says that the purchasing manager takes care of the sale, so it's not clearly defined in it.
What was that section, Mr. Gray?
4.4, rejection of the bid. And one other note, it was stated that you're not going to see job growth in a residential neighborhood, but that's a problem with zoning, not with the neighborhood. The next item is Gowell's Market, which you want to rezone a residential neighborhood to a neighborhood business. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I would encourage the Economic Development Department to open their mind and not close it to anybody who might want to invest. Thank you.
Last item on the workshop, Gowls.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, we've received a request from a business, Gowell's Market, that was just mentioned. We met with Councilor Stone, the property owner, and discussed an expansion that they would like to do a while back. And in order to do an expansion in their zoning district, they are within a residential neighborhood, but Auburn pretty uniquely has tried to protect their small neighborhood business, neighborhood retail stores, convenience stores, by creating what's called a neighborhood business zone. So basically, at some time in the past, decades ago, it was chosen by the planning board and city council to create this small neighborhood business zone that just encompasses the parcel where the neighborhood store was traditionally located. Gowell's is one of those. There are a number of them throughout the city. They've since acquired the property next door to them and really do have a need to expand if they're going to offer more grocery type items, larger deli space, and more efficient cashiering at the store. They discussed this with staff and counselor for the ward. Counselor Stone and Counselor Walker signed on to a proposal that says that we should at least take a look at considering this as a zone change to allow this expansion. The city has already decided to invest a lot of money in that neighborhood in public infrastructure. This is exactly the type of further investment in the neighborhood that I think we've all hoped to see by making a public investment. So staff absolutely supports moving this forward through the process laid out by the ordinance so that we can take public input and really give this consideration first at a planning board public hearing, and then the planning board would form a recommendation and bring it back to the council for 2 readings and a public hearing. So there would be ample opportunity for public input. But we think this is exactly the type of amendment that may allow for private investment that the council's been sort of betting on by making the public investments on the front end.
Any questions? Everyone clear on process, that the council simply being asked to ask the planning board to review the issue and walk through their normal process?
Will that be a future agenda item at a normal meeting?
It's on today as an item to refer it to the planning board.
Does that require 2 readings? Or?
This is just asking the planning board to take it up. They would then have their public hearings. Should they come back, when they come back to us with a recommendation, we would then have 2 readings on the recommendation. This is simply what the ordinance allows the council to initiate, asking the planning board to look at a matter. So,
And what it would do if the planning board and the council were so inclined through that process is expand the neighborhood business zone to include another property that the owner of Gowell's has acquired next door. And it would allow for a small 600 to 1,000 square foot expansion of the store.
Mr. Mayor, by doing this, we're cutting through a little bit of the red tape.
we're trying to accelerate the process for this property owner to know whether they'll have the green light to invest or not. So, yeah.
Normally, they would have to file a fee and go through a longer process.
They would have to initiate a petition and find those in the neighborhood to sign the petition as part of getting something referred to the planning board on their own.
But all the other processes, hearings and everything will be in place. Just cuts out a few steps.
Yeah, I have a question. Is as the map shows, what's currently owned, is that all zoned for the general neighborhood business, or is it just where the store sets right now?
So right now, if I can get, the store sets right here. It's hard to see, the shading's not very good. The Redemption Center sits here. The property owner owns this next lot at 127 Hampshire Street. They would like the zone, this lighter shade neighborhood business zone, to be expanded to include either all or a portion of this lot to the north.
Now, I was reading in the comp plan, it seemed like that area, that section was intended to protect neighborhood businesses as much as the residents themselves. Say you can't just arbitrarily get rid of a business because you want the neighborhood businesses.
The business could stay there forever. It's grandfathered, essentially. Throughout many areas of the city, there were small neighborhood businesses created like this one. The comp plan, for some reason, didn't recognize this one. I looked through past notes. I don't see any deliberate action to not recognize that one like we did some of the other ones. Heath Co's is an example of one on Court Street. The pizza market on the corner of Park and Lake is another example. I'm not sure why the comp plan didn't specifically recognize this one, but I think it was more of an oversight than anything, because the zoning has always recognized it, and there was no specific discussion to remove it from the comp plan. So our suggestion would be to look at both at the same time, and if we want to allow the expansion, amend both to show it for the future.
Well, I personally don't like the idea of circumventing the idea of the neighbors in the neighborhood going through this, because it's a major impact. Maybe everything is going to be different, but it's an impact to the neighborhood to do this. And yet to circumvent that, to go through us so that they don't have to go to the neighbors and get input and really get petitions signed and all that kind of stuff, tells me that we're just trying to strong-arm something. And I don't feel comfortable with the council doing that myself.
And there are 3 sort of equally weighted processes to bring this up for consideration. And I think that's all we're doing, is we're bringing it up so that it can go through the proper process of consideration. One is by petition, 25 registered voters. It doesn't have to be from the neighborhood, but they have to be registered voters. Another one is by the planning board initiating it and then doing the proper public notices and seeking input from everybody that's affected. And then the other one is by the council. And I think in this
we
case,
required the Subaru store to get the 25 votes.
We didn't require them, they chose.
So they went through the process before they came to us.
they had a choice to either try to get the planning board to initiate that to try to get a counselor to initiate that or to do the petition, and they chose the petition.
Yeah, because they wanted to make sure their neighbors were all in agreement, or at least enough people were in agreement before they went ahead and did something.
That may have been part of it.
Well, in all fairness, coming to the council and asking the council to move this forward is a legitimate process. It's part of a process that's provided to people seeking this type of change.
And to be clear, Counselor Stone was part of a meeting with the business owner, and with follow-up conversation, it was, how can we tighten the time? Like, if they're looking to make a spring investment and we're about to deploy $1.5 million in public infrastructure, do we want to at least give this person an up or down answer of, do they have the ability to expand or not? So I suggested Counselor Stone find another counselor, and let's have the council refer it. So, I mean, I think this is part of being business-friendly. Let's at least give the business owner a quicker yes or no answer, rather than make them have to run through hoops to find out, but
And this
it'll be
is,
it'll be up to you guys to decide.
yeah, excuse me, it's a proven business. I mean, it's just an expansion of a long-time business. It's a key element in the neighborhood. If you go by that place, you see people walking to that facility, that store all the time. Matter of fact, there are traffic jams now, you know, right in front of that place because of the snowbanks. You know, and you'll see trucks from out of the neighborhood stopping there, and you know, it was a dream to me because, you know, here we're making that big investment in Hampshire Street, and we want, you know, it's hoped that the city infrastructure will spur additional commercial investment, and it's exactly what's happening. So, you know, I think it's a win for the city, for the neighbors, and for the store, and which is, by the way, very much a family business. It's now second generation taking over management of the place. So it's a good story, and I think they're doing it the right way, and you know, I fully support their efforts.
And through the process that would start, if the council initiates this, we will send out a mailed notice to every property owner within 500 feet of the area that would be affected. We'll do 2 newspaper notices ahead of the public hearing and really solicit as much input as we can. We'll do the same when we get back to the council.
Walker, one last comment?
Well, thank you. I think you're going to find that the neighborhood is going to be in agreement with this. If we just go back a little bit in history, there was another store just up the street a little ways from that one that couldn't stay in business, that couldn't do what this little store has been able to hold on to. Gulf Street had a store for many, many, many years. That goes back when Bob used to go down there and buy candy. So that was a long time ago. Turner Street, that had 2 stores, and finally they went out. This one has held on for a long time. And if they don't get what they want, I believe you're going to find they will go like the rest by the wayside. And if this is an opportunity for us to help them along, I think it's time that we worry about the small businesses that are still in business, luckily, and not worry because there may be 1 or 2 neighbors that don't like them or the situation. So I'm hoping we're more friendly with the businesses than we are worrying about 2 neighbors out of 100 over there, because I believe you're going to find he's going to have plenty of support.
Well, my concern only is that we're looking at expanding a business quite greatly. So if he's going to be successful, traffic counts will go up, it'll be busier, and that's good, but it's a neighborhood. So we determine now that Hampshire Street's no longer a neighborhood, it's a commercial district, and the lighting and the traffic and whatever that comes from it. Is it I mean, we're just going to say that's what we want to do in that neighborhood?
This is exactly what we want to do in that neighborhood.
Okay.
You're
I mean,
exactly right. What we
then
want is a
we want
small
commercial
neighborhood
district, what
business
was a-
to be successful, and in a neighborhood that's walkable, we're not going to see traffic counts. So what we're going to find is more people will be walking to Gallows Market because they're going to have more offerings, people in the neighborhood, and we're investing $1.5 million in making the street more walkable. So as the foot traffic increases, the people who just want to cut through the neighborhood will have to slow down for those crossing to go to Gallows.
Wow.
So I think this is all part of the narrative. It's a wonderful thing.
It's a wonderful thing. But does it mean that obviously if we approve this, it goes to planning board, and then if they turn it down, does it come back to us to override what they decide to do, like we had with the last situation?
Planning board would make a recommendation to you. Yep, and it would come back to the council whether that recommendation was positive or negative. But they'll hear from a lot of people in the meantime, and they'll have a good sense of what the neighborhood wants to see.
All right, that concludes our 3 items. There were 2 executive sessions, none of them requiring action. Would either of them be able to be completed in the time we have to make use of the time?
Yes, one of them at least.
Okay, which
Yeah.
one would you guys ask, which one would you prefer?
Let's go
There's a labor negotiation and economic development.
economic development.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we go into executive session to discuss an economic development matter pursuant to Title I MRSA, Section 4056C.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Pross, second by Counselor Walker. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carries 5-0-1.
guess I did know some of the other people, I just didn't remember.
Oh, it was, oh my God.
Well, I thought it was cool anyway.
Still gonna have the auditor present, but,
How old you were.
Good evening. Call to order this meeting of the Auburn City Council for January 9th, 2017. If you'd all please join me in the pledge.
And justice for all.
I do want to take a brief moment and acknowledge that Councilor Burns is not with us tonight. He is with his grandfather, and would ask that all of you keep Councilor Burns and his family in your thoughts and prayers tonight. We have a consent calendar. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Titus, second by Councilor Walker. Those in favor, show of hands. Those opposed? We have the minutes from December 19th, 2016. Would entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the minutes.
Second?
Motion from Councilor Walker, second from Councilor Stone. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, show of hands. Those opposed? Those abstaining? Carries 4-0-2 with Councilor Pross abstaining. We have a presentation this evening on the audit. I will make a public announcement. I spoke with the finance director before. The city charter requires a joint meeting of the city council and the school committee to hear the audit presentation before it's accepted by the council. It looks like we may delay that until the joint CIP meeting and be able to take up the audit at that time. Is that the expectation? All right, I'll open the floor.
Good evening. I'm Casey Leonard. I'm a partner on the engagement. I'm here with Josh Coaches. He is the supervisor. I want to start by saying the audit again this year went very well. I want to thank Jill and her staff, as well as Jude Sear in the school department and his staff. It was a pleasure working again with everyone this year. Similar to what we've done in the past, we put together a little presentation that Josh and I are going to go through. If you have any questions at any point, please feel free to stop us. If you flip to the first page, or the first graph that we have here, we have a summary of the audit results for the year. So we finished the audit just within the last 3 or so weeks. Our report was dated December 22nd. So as I said, we just recently finished this. In terms of the opinion on the financial statements, the city, which includes the school department, received an unmodified opinion, which means the financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or it was a clean opinion, which is a very good thing. In addition to the financial statement audit, we also essentially do 2 separate compliance audits. We do an audit in accordance with government auditing standards. It's what we commonly call a yellow book audit. In here, we considered the city's internal controls over the financial reporting process. We also performed tests of compliance with certain laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements. And I'm glad to report that there were no material weaknesses, nor were there any significant deficiencies. We also performed an audit in accordance with what's called uniform guidance, and that's because the city expended more than $750,000 worth of federal grant proceeds. In 2016, the city actually spent about $8.3 million in federal grants. And this is really a program-specific audit that we do. In the current year, we looked at the child nutrition cluster, so all your students that are receiving free and reduced meals. We also looked at the special education cluster. It's what we usually call the local entitlement program. Here we did have a finding. It was related to the school nutrition program, and it had to do with paid lunch equity. Josh is actually going to talk about that a little bit. He's our resident expert on this.
So one of the requirements for the school lunch program is called paid lunch equity. It's a fairly new requirement, started in 2013. Basically, it requires the school department to compare the weighted average price that they charge for a paid lunch to what's called the federal equity, which is the difference between the federal reimbursement rate the school department receives for a free lunch and that of a paid lunch. In this case, if the school's weighted average price is below that federal threshold, they are required to either increase the price of a paid lunch by a certain amount, and it's based on a calculation, but it cannot exceed, or is not required to exceed 10 cents in any given year, or they have to subsidize the program with non-federal dollars. So general fund transfers, or the general fund could cover the salary of the nutrition director, or basically in any way, as long as it's supplemented in a non-federal local dollars. During the testing found that this did not occur, that the weighted average price was below the federal threshold, and we also noted that the school department did not meet either of the requirements. They either did not raise prices or supplement the program with non-federal dollars. So we had a federal finding with that. The school department actually had met with the state, and the state had deemed that they did meet the requirement, but when I looked at it, they had used the wrong calculation. They were using a wrong base year. So that's where our federal finding comes in. What that really means is that the program will be tested next year, where we will look at the program again and see if the federal finding has been corrected. I believe that it has already been corrected, as they raised prices in the response that we got from Jude, that the price was increased 10 cents for fiscal year 2017, which would make them compliant again. But again, we'll test that again next year.
Before we get into the numbers, I also just want to mention that, again, in 2016, the city's participating in the Governmental Financial Officers Association's CAFR program. CAFR stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. This is a voluntary program. Auburn has participated in this program for 24 consecutive years. In addition to doing a set of financial statements that are of very high quality, a participant also has to do a transmittal letter and a set of statistical tables, and then it is sent off to the GFOA. It gets reviewed, and if it passes muster with them, then you get a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. The 2015 submission, so last year's submission, did receive that certificate. We're hopeful that the 2016 submission will also receive that certificate. Just a little bit background, and I know I've mentioned this in the past, this is a voluntary program. There is, I would estimate, probably 250 different governmental entities in the state of Maine that can participate in this program. There's usually about 16 to 18 that do, and that includes the state of Maine. In terms of local municipalities, I think there's somewhere around 14. And as I said, Auburn has participated for 24 consecutive years, one of the longest participants in that program. So kudos to your staff for making that happen. The financial world, the rating agencies look at this extremely favorably. So again, it's a very good thing. We're going to jump into some of the financial results for the year. This first graph shows general fund balance. So if you take your total assets less your total liabilities and deferred inflows of resources, you're left with the equity position for the city at the end of the year. And as you can see, we have 4 separate categories of fund balance here. We have non-spendable, restricted, assigned, and unassigned. Non-spendable fund balance represents resources which cannot be spent because they're not in a spendable form. Specifically, we're talking about long-term receivables here. Those can't be easily converted to cash, and so we're required to put them into that restricted category, or into that non-spendable category. Restricted fund balance comprises resources with constraints placed on their use externally, and this specifically represents the school department's general fund balance. Because the school is supported through state education subsidies, and those amounts have to be used to educate your students, any remaining balances have to be put into that restricted fund balance. Assigned fund balance represents amounts that are specifically set aside by the city council. so there's some discretion here. There is a list in the notes to the financial statements of what's included in that balance. Most notably, there was $825,000 set aside to balance the 2017 budget. There was also $1.2 million set aside for self-insurance for the city's workers' comp program. And then unassigned fund balance is what remains after amounts are put into those three other categories. It's essentially what's left over. Total fund balance increased in 2016 from $10,845,000 to $10,951,000, which was a $105,000 increase. And you can see somewhat of a trend here from 2012 to 2016. I mean, fund balance was really decreasing until 2015. And then in 2016, obviously, it's come back up again. And you can see that in some of the other graphs. Any questions on fund balance?
So the next four slides are going to go over the general funds, revenues, and expenditures as compared to budget. The third and fourth slide actually deal with just the school department only. So the first two are total general fund, including the school department. And I'm going to go over some of the more larger variances between budget and actual. Excuse me. But if you have any questions on any of them, feel free to stop me. Taxes revenues were over budget due to higher than expected excise taxes. Intergovernmental revenues were over budget primarily due to higher than expected state revenue sharing, school subsidy, and Betty exemption reimbursements. Municipal charges for services were over budget primarily due to higher than expected EMS fees and rental income. And finally, miscellaneous revenues were over budget primarily due to the sale of city property such as the old police station, as well as the receipt of unbudgeted miscellaneous revenues.
With respect to the miscellaneous, the sale of the police station, do you confirm where that revenue was it booked towards expenses?
No, the sale of the police building, it was booked towards a miscellaneous, it was called sale of property, I believe.
And what was the total increase in the fund balance for that fiscal year?
$105,000.
So this next slide is going to look at the general fund's expenditures budget to actual. And some of the more significant variances are general government expenditures were under budget primarily due to lower than expected benefits and wage increases. Public safety expenditures were over budget primarily due to higher than expected salaries, overtime, and vehicle repairs. Public services expenditures were under budget primarily due to lower than expected overtime wages, vehicle repairs, gas and oil, as well as water, sewer, and electric utilities. And finally, other appropriations expenditures were under budget primarily due to the budgeted but unused emergency reserve, as well as lower than expected debt service expenditures.
The public safety, do you have a breakdown of which specific departments those overages occurred within?
I don't think we have that with us. We don't provide that amount of detail in the financials, do we?
No, it would be on statement 6.
Statement 6.
There on page 41 of the CAFR. It is the entire amount that's over, is all in fire. The fire, EMS, transport, police were both under budget, and water and sewer broke even. So it was completely in the fire department.
With maybe it's a question for Jill. The water and sewer does not sit in the fire budget, is that correct? Fire stands alone?
Right. Water and sewer is separate.
So, a question for the auditors, with respect to testing of internal controls, perhaps part of this is a directive you'd have to get from our audit committee. So our city charter says that no department may be overexpended without a vote of the council to reappropriate funds. So if those departments had deficits, what's the test of whether or not we're actually following the required charter controls for financials?
Charter actually go to that?
It does.
Because that is not, I don't believe we're disclosing that in the notes to the financial statements. That it's at that level, at the department level?
Yep. At the department level. The council budgets by department. Managers have discretion within departments, but can't move funds across departments without a vote of the council.
We don't move them, though. We're not moving funds for cross departments.
There would have had to have been some draw of resources if the fire department budget was $281,000 in the red. Those bills were paid out of some account.
You mean a different cash account?
I'm showing the fire department in this report here was budgeted 4.1 million and expended 4.4. They expended more than what was budgeted.
Correct.
It was,
They have more income?
I think I asked that question at the audit committee meeting as well. And I believe finance director said that there was no transfer to cover that, it was just left alone and reported as a variance. Obviously, the funds came out of general fund.
And I'm raising this, that the charter is very clear that the council budgets departments. If a department is going to expend more than is budgeted, you can't just take it out from the bottom. You have to come to the council and have an appropriation. We're facing one of those situations right now. We've currently overdrawn our legal services department, and the council has not yet taken action to move funds from another department. So I just want to make sure I understand that when it comes time to do the audit for the current fiscal year, that we may want to ask some more targeted questions about internal controls on the finances, and
Well, I
we
think
can come back to that.
somebody's got to come to, the staff has got to come to the council and request the transfer.
Correct.
And if that's not happening, it's a violation of the charter, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And our auditors should be aware of that?
Well, part of this is the check on internal controls. If they're looking to see whether they're not taking charter provisions and cross-referencing unless we ask. Are you not?
Well, I guess there is I'm not finding it right now, but we do disclose in the notes to the financial statements at what legal level the budget is approved and at what legal level it must be maintained. And I don't believe right now it discloses it at that lower level.
I know that we had talked about this at the audit committee meeting, and historically, we've shown the over expenditures and never moved funds at any time. To answer your question, we did not cross-reference the charter when we were doing our internal control testing. When we do our disbursement testing, we're not specifically saying, okay, is this expenditure exceeding the charter's?
It gets very difficult because we come in 2 months after the end of the fiscal year. It's hard for us to be a control to stop departments from overexpending when we're coming in after the end of the year, nor am I really sure that, it is disclosed as being overexpended in the financial statements, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's right there. I think, again, we talked about this, and I think it was discussed that, and Jill said that it was done, that there were no transfers made for any overdraft at any department level, and that she was looking at this based upon the whole budget level,
That's correct.
entire budget level.
Jonathan and I read the charter differently.
And you're making aren't you making entries after the end of the fiscal year? Anyways, journal entries?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we're on a cash basis during the year, and at the year end, we're on what they call a modified accrual basis. So we have to continue to make entries. We continue to make entries until the audit's done.
So I'm curious, Jill, you said it, that you and Jonathan, the mayor, read the charter differently. I'm curious to read your interpretation about cross-departmental
believe it's-
expenditures.
If we don't do cross-department expenditures, I mean, we charge the cost to the proper department. I know in the past, now, a couple of years ago, we had a really bad winter. Public Works was, we thought we're gonna be over budget. We came to the council and asked to, if needed, use $150,000 from emergency reserve. We never needed to do that. Their budget wasn't over, and so we never made that transfer. That's the only transfer I remember coming to you about. We've had, over the last 4 or 5 years, examples were general assistance was over 2 or 3 years ago. We came to the council, talked about that. We never made a transfer for that. The fire department has been over budget just about every year. We've never made that transfer. As long as the bottom line of the budget is not overdrawn, some accounts are underspent, some are over. We've just, I can tell you, in my 30 years, 35 years of doing this, I've never made those transfers.
But do you agree that under the charter, it's appropriate to come back to the council to request approval for appropriations to cover expenditures that are over budget within a department?
I don't believe it says that.
Okay.
If you look also on the bottom of page 54, it talks about expenditures that are over appropriations. They are disclosed there. And there's, I don't know, there's a handful of items that are over expended.
Go to the next slide. Any other questions?
Yeah, in total, the city's expenditures were $2,134,000 less than we appropriated.
Correct.
But we don't lump sum budget by charter. That's what I'm raising, and I think we'll have to have further discussion with the audit committee about how we ensure appropriate oversight of the budget going forward. And perhaps we have that conversation with our auditors as well.
No, I think that would be a good idea. Just want to be careful because I see other departments that went slightly over too. So do we need to be authorizing any department that goes over by any amount? So I think you're right. We need to have that discussion so that it's clear. Because that could be every meeting we're discussing something, and maybe a good discussion too. I'm not saying we won't do it, but.
It'd be great to get an opinion from our city solicitor on that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
when you talk about EMS and that part of the fire department is a business, and as they have more more ambulance EMS calls, there's a certain amount of income that may or may not come in, whether the person has insurance or the ability to pay. So there's some outstanding uncollectibles there, perhaps. Some more activity is going to, how are you going to really determine how much activity that you're going to get from that part of the business? Obviously, you might be over budget because you don't know how many occurrences of ambulance calls you're going to have.
And we ought to make sure as a city council that we have the appropriate checks in place to monitor that because it's taxpayer money that's at risk.
That's true. Anytime that you have a business, you're in a business activity, you have risk. Because when you're charging somebody for a service, they may or may not have the ability to pay.
So this next slide is going to look at the school department only revenues. Excuse me. Some of the more significant variances are intergovernmental revenues were over budget due to a higher than expected state subsidy. Charges for services were under budget, primarily due to lower than expected adult education tuitions. And finally, other revenues were under budget, primarily due to lower than expected revenues from pre-K CDS, as well as other miscellaneous income. Slide 7 looks at the school department-only expenditures, budget to actual. Special education instruction expenditures were under budget primarily due to lower than expected wages and benefits, as well as costs related to outside behavioral services. Facilities maintenance expenditures were under budget primarily due to staff resignations being replaced by contracted services, lower than expected overtime costs, and lower than expected costs for electricity and repairs and maintenance. And finally, other expenditures were under budget primarily due to lower than expected adult education salaries and benefits for counselors, administration, and teachers.
The next graph shows unassigned fund balance as a percentage of budget. This is one of those calculations that we do every year to determine if the city is financially healthy. We generally, as a firm, recommend 1 to 2 months worth of expenditures, which equals 8.3 to 16.7%. When we did this calculation as of June 30th, 2016, that percentage equaled 7.54%. So you're on the low end of what we generally recommend. The city does have a fund balance policy, and that is to maintain unassigned fund balance of 12.5% of actual expenditures on a basis consistent with generally accepted accounting principles. And when we did this calculation as of June 30th, 2016, that percentage equaled 7.73%. And so the city is falling short of that fund balance policy. It did increase from last year. Last year it was about 6.5. So you're going in the right direction. You can pretty much correlate this with your total fund balance. You know, I know this is something that management and the council is aware of your fund balance, which has decreased over this 5 years that are presented here.
Does that include the school department?
It does. Well, it does. I mean, your school department's included in the citywide general fund. When you talk about unassigned fund balance, it's only on the city side because all the fund balance related to your school department is restricted. It's in a different category of fund balance, but it's in there.
That was that $966,000 that we saw on the last slide?
No.
No.
No. The school department's general fund balance was 1.6 million.
Okay. What happens to the 966 that we saw on the last slide?
966.
Is there a budgeted use of?
Was that?
What was that?
That was the budget
the
use,
budget
fund
that-
balance on the school side?
Surplus.
It was the surplus on the school side, I thought.
That would end up in the restricted
It's restricted.
fund balance, yeah.
This next slide is new for this year. We just wanted you to see what percentage of total revenues come from local dollars versus state dollars. As you can see, tax revenues makes up approximately 61% of the total city revenues, while intergovernmental revenues make up approximately 34.5%. Intergovernmental revenues are your state subsidy, school appropriations, and basically anything that comes from the state of Maine, for the most part, is going to be intergovernmental. If you add just those two, it's a little over 95% of total revenues comes from just taxes and intergovernmental revenues. This is pretty consistent. As you can see, the last 5 years, it's been pretty consistent, especially for intergovernmental. They've basically hovered right around 34 to 35% of total city revenues. And tax revenues, right around 61 to 63% for the last 5 years.
What type of percentage would we see if we went back, let's say 10 years instead of 5 years on the intergovernmental side? Has there been a significant change?
I'd have to look back to see if that is, held steady for the 5 years prior to this.
I would assume it'd be pretty consistent.
I would assume.
Yeah,
it'd be
I would
consistent.
guess it'd be pretty consistent.
So the final two slides are really just to highlight the amount of expenditures that each department or function represents of the total city expenditures. Obviously, education is by far the largest of the expenditures at about 52%. This is in line with all other municipalities. It's usually, I'd say from our experience, 40 to 60, sometimes more than 60% of total municipal expenditures. Public safety and general government are just over 12%, and the remaining departments or functions make up roughly 23%. The slide right after is 2015, and we just wanted to show you the difference between and the good thing is that you really don't see major variances. And the largest variance from 2015 to 2016 was in public services, and that was only a 1% swing. So that means obviously the expenditures departments-wise or function-wise are staying pretty relatively consistent from year to year.
As a percentage of the entire
As a
budget?
percentage of the total, correct.
And it might be nice to have your perspective, larger perspective, having looked at other municipalities. How does that chart fare in terms of the types of percentages? You commented on the percentage towards education. What can you say about public safety and the other segments that are charted out there?
Sure. You know, if you have a municipality where they have a school department, education is going to be by far the largest. It's usually anywhere between 45 and 60%. You guys are at 52%. Public safety a lot of times is the number two. Not always. You know, sometimes public works is higher. You know, you guys are a pretty large service center type city, so you know, you probably see more expenditures on the city side than you would for a smaller municipality that is, you know, doing less on the municipal side. So it's pretty consistent with a lot of the larger municipalities, I think, in the state.
You don't see any major outliers?
No. No.
Thank you.
Else? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time tonight. We are at the first open session of the evening. If anyone here would like to speak to the council about anything relating to Auburn business that's not on the agenda, the floor is open. Happy New Year, Mr. Pelletier.
Good evening. Larry Pelletier, New Auburn, from New Auburn. The reason I come here this evening, some of you are aware that we recently at Maine Oxy moved into a brand new building, or an old building restored, so it looks brand new, in July of last year. And we soon saw that there was a serious problem directly in front of us on Route 100 North, and that was a speeding problem. That particular road there starts at the bottom of the hill, coming up the hill at 45, changes to 35, and before it dips down the hill by the old Charlene's, it turns to 25. We had the police department bring that trailer that monitors people's speeds and tells them to slow down, and they set it there for 7 days, and in that 7 days, over 53,000 vehicles passed in front of our doors there. And 90% of those folks were speeding, and a lot of them were criminal speeding. So the last time I spoke to Lieutenant Harrington, he's been in contact with the MDOT, and I believe that Dan Goyette is also working on it. And I haven't heard anything from the state as to what they could do about it or they want to do about it. But what I would ask you folks is if you could, this council and its mayor, maybe prod them and see if they're going to take care of the situation, because on a daily basis, it's a near miss every day, every single day. You're sitting there trying to concentrate on what you're doing, and something happens directly in front of you, and one of these days, it's not going to be pleasant. You're talking about fully loaded pulp trucks and tractor trailers hauling hazardous materials and dump trucks going at an excessive rate of speed, and something needs to be done, so I would ask for your help.
Would you be okay with a little more noise at your building with one solution?
What was that?
Well, DOT just gave us notice that from the New Gloucester line to about Kitty Hawk, they're going to be putting in the center line rumble strips. And I think a fairly simple, low-cost solution that I would happily squeak to DOT. I'm not sure who their contractor is, but perhaps they could at least get an estimate for an add-on for a safety project. To actually put some rumble strips going up the hill where the speed limit changes, and then maybe to better delineate the travel lanes, because as you know, it looks like about a 20-foot travel lane as you approach your building, so folks try to pass each other on the left going about 50. Putting some rumble strips coming up the hill when the speed limit drops and some lane delineating rumble strips, I think would catch people's attention and perhaps help to slow folks down.
Whatever works. Whatever works.
I'm not sure if that's something they've put on the table, but if DOT already has a contractor mobilizing for the other end of 202, maybe we could ask them to do this one.
Thank you.
They make noise, though. Keep it safe. Anyone else? All right, thank you, Larry, for bringing that. We have one item under unfinished business. I would entertain a motion so I can open the second reading.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt ordinance, 09-101-72016, amending the zoning map in the area of the 1863 Pownell Road, second reading.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion from Councilor Titus, a second from Councilor Pross for ordinance 09-101-72016, amending the zoning map in the area of 1863 Pownell Road. This is the second reading. It did fail on first reading. I will open the floor for any public comment.
Good evening, gentlemen. Kim Vesperis, 42 Hersey Hill Road. I represent Gary McFarland, the owner of the property. Sorry about my voice. I've been sick for about 10 days, and I hope to make it through the evening. I know you have a comprehensive package in front of you with regard to this property. I guess the easiest way to approach this is the following simple fact history of this property. Gary McFarland was not responsible for the problem that arose here, and neither was the former owner, Heaven Love. Neither of them had an issue here. From what we could gather, this problem arose from a surveyor making a mistake when the original owner, who owned the entire farm, decided to mortgage only the home. Any surveyor that would have gone to do this work would have first gone to see what the requirements were for space and bulk requirements. It's a 10-acre minimum. How the surveyor came up with an 8.1-acre lot is still something we don't have an answer to, because we could never identify who the surveyor was that did the work. That in and of itself was not the problem. The problem arose when the owner stopped making payments and the bank foreclosed. When the bank foreclosed, it created the lot that is now undersized. Mr. McFarland came to me about a year ago on this property and asked my recommendation as to what to do. I told him to not do anything. I said, don't buy this property until this problem is fixed. And I can't tell you that it will be fixed. Gary has faith in the city, and sometimes blind faith, I guess, but he has faith in the city, and he decided to go ahead and buy this property and pay off almost $60,000 in back taxes that the city would have never gotten otherwise, on the expectation that the city somehow would fix this problem for him. He doesn't want to develop this lot. He never wanted to develop this property. That's never been proposed by him to the city. All he wants to do is live in a house that was built in 1900 and be able to improve it back to what it was in its glory days, which some of you may not know was Auburn's first brothel. A very interesting component of Auburn history. Not necessarily the greatest history, but a very significant part of that history. So Gary's plea to the city is to allow him to improve this lot, maintain it as a single residence, and by the way, we, if approved, there will be placed of record in the Registry of Deeds a self-imposed restriction which will prevent any further development of this lot forever, to be enforced expressly by the city, so that if there is ever any attempt to develop the property, the city will be able to stop it in its tracks. We just urge you and plead with you to make Gary's investment in keeping this historic piece of the city upright, because without your help, this house is going to be torn down, because he's not going to be able to improve it, and it will just go into ruins. I'd love to answer any questions you might have.
What
I'll
type,
allow some brief questions. We are in a public hearing, but go ahead.
well, I guess my question would be, what type of investment is your client prepared to make in the property, if you have any idea?
He's going to improve the entire structure. He's not going to add on to it or any of that stuff. He's just going to restore it. It's, I think, 12 or 13 rooms. I don't know the number of rooms. It's a huge, huge home. If you've looked at it on the website and seen the pictures in the city file, it's a very elegant, old-fashioned, early 1900s structure. It needs a lot of work. It hasn't had a lot of work done in a long, long time. And the only way to get that work done is to have permits. Permits can't be issued unless this lot is considered to be either legally non-conforming or conforming. And so we just urge you to be able to have that happen. And that's really the only expectation Gary has.
Is there a timeline for, if this were to go forward with the change in the zoning, is there a timeline for those improvements?
Gary's right here. I think he's going to do it right away. Gary? As soon as possible. Given winter, maybe some outside work won't be done right away, but obviously, a lot of interior work can get started right now. Thank you.
Public hearing is still open.
Dan Herrick, 470 Hatch Road. You just heard a lot of misforgivings that aren't true to the fact. I would also love to see this place be put back to its original shape, the way it was when I remembered it and worked there. This is not the way to bring this back to original shape by rezoning. It's been long enough, and it's time for this city to move forward and do something about these small issues in the ag department, ag resource protection zone, and many other zones in this city. If we rezone this and make an exception for this one parcel, we're gonna do it for a lot of other people in this city also. We'll open up a can of worms. Again, it's a beautiful piece of property. It's a nice piece of property that needs to be redone. And I believe it can be redone, and it can be done equitably with the rezoning not coming into effect, but the ag zone being worked. We've studied it. There's been numerous times, numerous statements out there that this council, past council, was gonna work this zone. It has yet to be seen. I think this problem can go away, and a lot of other problems can go away in this city if we stand up and stretch and start working the problem issues in these zones. And this is one of the major ones. I don't recommend rezoning that. It was brought to this planning board by 2 councilors, which is fine. If this goes through, you're gonna have a lot of people coming forward, and you're gonna be doing the same thing. So, to me, let's just fix the problem without rezoning, because it can be fixed.
Joe Gray, Soper's Mill Road. we all want to see this property fixed. It just comes down to how do we do it properly? And his lawyer told him he's willing to, he threw down the $60,000 back taxes. But Miss Love also came into the city with a check for about $43,000 to pay the taxes a couple years prior to that. But because the city will never give permits, she didn't pay the taxes. She was trying to use the only leverage she had to get some permits to fix the damn house, because that's what she needed to do. But our planning and permitting department repeatedly said no, no, no. So if it was no for her, it's no for him. Let's solve this the right way. Mr. Herrick is right. We need to approach the whole ag zone and rework this thing. We all want to see his house come back to life. Miss Love wants to see that house come back to life. Everybody wants it to come back to life, but we don't want special treatment because, yes, it will open the floodgates. There's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way to do it, and rezoning that one property is the wrong way.
Bring it back to the council. Any council discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would really relish the opportunity to make a few comments here. You know, earlier we spoke about and throughout my term as a city councilor, we have spoken frequently about the need to broaden our tax base in this community. We've spent a lot of time hearing from members of the public, some of whom just sat up here and spoke against the motion, and also spoke against a comprehensive study of our agricultural zone. It's almost like we can't win for losing. We need to do something here, and here's an opportunity to open the doors to adding tax revenue to our tax base, to broadening our tax base, allowing for investment. Why should we allow a surveyor's mistake or, you know, Ms. Love's mistakes in the past, perhaps, in failing to secure counsel in advance of her purchase of the property, to hold us back as a city? Why should taxpayers suffer for those past mistakes? We have an opportunity to fix a problem that's on the books. We have an opportunity to add to our tax base. I don't want to worry about what's fair to one person or what may have happened to a prior owner of the property. I want to worry about what's best for our city and what's best for taxpayers. And we have an owner here who's willing to make a significant investment to take a substantial property and put it on the tax rolls for its value. And I cannot, in good conscience, drag my feet in the past in a manner that prevents us from moving forward as a city. I don't want to languish in what happened previously and let that us be prevented from moving forward in a positive way for taxpayers here. I think we need to open the door and be open to change and open to a positive opportunity that's going to help put money in the coffers of this city, which we sorely need. And furthermore, I'm not going to sit up here and govern from a position of fear about what might happen in the future, the opening the floodgates argument. We had a discussion earlier about spot zoning, changing the zoning for a particular section of Hampshire Street. You know, none of us jumped out of our skin and said that that was a horrible idea from what I heard in our workshop today. So I hope that my fellow councilors will look at what's on the table before us and look at it as an opportunity and an opportunity to move forward and to do something positive for the city, and not an opportunity to be dragged down by what may have happened before.
Council debate? I will ask the clerk for a roll call.
Counselor Pross?
Yay.
Counselor Stone?
No.
Counselor Titus?
No.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Young?
No.
That fails 2-3. And, fails on second reading, so the matter is behind us. We have an executive session with respect to labor negotiations.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss a matter regarding a labor negotiation pursuant to 1 MRSA, Section 4056D.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion by Counselor Titus, second by Counselor Stone. Those in favor, show of hands. Those opposed, 501.
what were you, 18?
What's that?
He's 20.
20 years old? David's post? That's fast.
We had an executive session, waiting for 2 counselors.
Yeah, we don't have a quorum. Right, because it's based on how many of us are actually here.
Erica is a counselor too. So we have 4 people.
Hey, the city attorney.
Oh, yeah. More money always. We're out of executive session. Reports, the only, given the hour, item I will raise for public awareness, folks who may have seen the posting, the city manager position has been reopened. The posting will be accepting applications through February 1st, and the council will initiate their review immediately after that. Any council reports?
I don't have a report, but I want to ask Jill if she will, or the manager, if he will, find out for sure what that charter says, because I'd like to know for sure what it says moving forward. I believe that any budget that we have to take and put money from something to something somewheres, that the council should at least know exactly where it's going, how it's getting there, where it's coming from. And I just think that's the right way of doing business in the city of Auburn. So everybody knows if the fire department ran over $1 million and we removed it from somewhere to pay that bill, we didn't just say it isn't being paid, it's just gonna be carried on from year to year. So please find out if the charter says we should or shouldn't, will or won't, so we know where we're moving going forward.
We will certainly do that.
Thank you.
Councilor Young, we'll come down the table.
Okay, I want to ask for forgiveness for missing one of my first meetings of the year.
Be 10 Hail Marys.
Well, I don't know if I know how to do that. I'm not Catholic. But I'll work for the next month to make sure that not only I know when the meetings are going to be, but that they're also posted properly on the website. And I'm a victim of fake news. And evidently, I was reading one place, and the meeting was actually in another. The Great Falls TV did meet at the high school, and we're looking at the new space at the studio that is being set up there. It's a possibility it can be used. And also, I would like to report that I guess with Charter taking over, there'll be some upgrades to HD-type programming, but there'll also be some increasing fees to those cable subscribers, and they'll be notified in the next couple of days. I think so. Isn't that right, City Manager?
I believe so.
Yeah. Other than that, I'm not aware of it. I'll make all the changes. I'll try to make a better update as soon as I look over my notes and the minutes of the meeting. That concludes my report.
A couple of things. Number one, I want to report to the public that the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission is hosting a ribbon cutting on January 27th at 4 p.m. At the north gate to the Spring Road on right off of North Auburn Road. They've made significant improvements to the trail markings out there over the course of the last, I'll say 4 or 5 months. And so they'll be highlighting some of those. If you're out and about at 4 o'clock on the 27th, you're invited to attend. It's open to the public, and we'll talk about some of that. January 24th at 6 p.m., the building committee for the Edward Little High School will be convening for its second meeting of the full body of the committee. So that'll be happening, and that's open to the public as well. I was at the school committee meeting as the mayor's appointee from the city council to the school committee on Wednesday of last week, and we had a nice discussion about teacher assessments. We're in the third year of a pilot program for teacher assessments pre-K through 12. And it was a really interesting presentation, an interesting workshop that was put on by the department, really getting into the nitty-gritty and the nuts and bolts of how we are evaluating teachers in our district. Of note was that we are using a different assessment method than the city of Lewiston is using for its teachers. We're using the Marzano Art and Science Teaching Framework, Learning Science International is the brand name associated with that. So I thought it was noteworthy that different districts are using different things, but from my understanding of that workshop, we are using a assessment model that has been adopted by pretty much the majority of the school districts in the state. So next year, we're going to be going live with that assessment, and I believe that that's pursuant to a state mandate that we go live with a formal assessment model. So we're in our last year of the pilot program, and it seems to be going pretty well. And a lot of energy and dedication and time and resources have been put into implementing that model. So we've really done a lot of work as a department to make sure that we are to the stage that we're at now. So something to keep in mind as we go forward. Also want to add that there was desire on the part of the school committee to do a joint workshop in the month of February, and I believe that there was discussions between the superintendent and our acting city manager with regard to scheduling that. The sentiment from the school committee, and I communicated on behalf of the city council that it was reciprocal, was that it was beneficial last year for us to have the two joint workshops that we did have, and so the hope is that there's reciprocating enthusiasm for doing a joint workshop in February in advance of the nitty-gritty of the budget season, as well as doing one toward the end of that. So I'll ask for your support as city councilors in moving in that direction and having that dual joint workshop session. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very short report, but most of the off-meeting time was spent preparing for the audit committee meeting. I'm sure Councilor Titus and I spent a few hours reviewing we got an advance copy from the finance director, and I think it was much more effective to have that in advance so that we could read through it going into the meeting and not be trying to listen to his presentation or their presentation and just grab all of it at one session. So I think the city is in very good shape financially from a financial operations standpoint. I think we have a huge issue in terms of growing the city. And I made that point at the Finance Committee meeting, and it was not well taken by one member at least. But we haven't grown the city at all in the last 10 years. And when you discount it for inflation, we're probably 70% of where we were 10 years ago. And that's not acceptable. And so I don't think it's sustainable because the unions, the employee unions are going to be wanting more and more. The cost of goods and services and materials is going to continue to increase. And if we're sitting just treading water, or even worse, not even staying above the surface, we're going to have a real problem. And I see that as the salient feature that came out of that audit report, that chart that showed our valuation. A lot is riding on our economic development efforts. And so Anyways, that's my short report.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing I need to report is next week, we will be having the monthly meeting of the Auburn Sewer District. It'll be at 4 o'clock at the district office. And on the 18th, Wednesday, will be the Auburn Water District meeting at 4 p.m., followed by a public hearing at 5, and I think that's here at City Hall, for the water rate increase. So just important dates for people to remember. But that's all I have.
Nothing.
Leroy went first.
Oh, sorry. Just a quick update, Neighborhood Challenge Grant. We did update the application that's posted online as well as an overview of the program. To date, we've received one application for the 10,000 grant, and we've had about 4 or 5 other inquiries from other various organizations. Applications have been taken, just haven't received them back. So we're certainly getting good interest. Hopefully we'll continue to see that, and I'll keep you updated as we continue to move forward with that. Just a quick plug for Winterfest, a reminder, January 27th through the 29th. If you haven't done so already, please check it out online. I think we got a lot of great events. Staff have been working very hard to put this together, and I think it's going to be the best one yet. So hopefully you get a chance to enjoy some of it. And lastly, the mayor alluded to it earlier. Staff have been working with the mayor to organize the first of, I think, 2, at least, roundtable discussions with residential multi-unit property owners. That'll be happening in February. The intent, really, kind of draft agendas, share the programs, like I just mentioned, Neighborhood Challenge Grant, but are some of our other grants and different programs we have out there. But mainly, we really want to hear from them and really understand what we're doing well, what are we missing, and what are their needs. The mayor, like I said, has been working with staff, and I know staff is excited about it, and I expect we'll be rolling that out through social media, website, the whole 9 yards, and promoting that. And they're going to be working to have touch points with some of these multi-unit owners so we can get them in the room with us and get that information. That's all I got.
Anyone here for the open session? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor? We'll be adjourned. Thank you.